Watch Put Up or Shut Up, the newest show coming exclusively to Motor Trend On Demand, July 20th, hosted by me, Brian Lowe's.
You've got a small block Chevy in your car and you need more power on a budget, and that's what you're going to find out about on this episode of Engine Masters. This is Engine Masters presented by AMSOIL, and man, am I going to get a lot of flack for this episode because yes, it's another small block Chevy, and this is going to be real basic. But here's my defense. I meet with a lot of aftermarket manufacturers and I ask them, what's your biggest selling part number? And invariably, it is some tchotchke for a small block Chevy. LS engines may be super hot, Fords and Mopars may be cool, but the fact remains that the small block Chevy still outsells everything else in the muscle car marketplace. And we still get questions from people going, man, I just want to hop up the 350 in my truck or whatever. This engine is based on the architecture founded in 1955. And they made these things all the way through 2003 in some vans, and Chevy still sells them as crate engines. The 350, which is what this is, started in 1969. There's a zillion of them. Now let's look at the absolute basic package that we're going to be running on this show. The engine is a crate motor from a place called First Mate Automotive. I bought it from Summit Racing for $1,399. I mean, it is basic. Cast pistons, cast crank, minuscule flat tappet camshaft, nothing trick. But for that price, you get everything from the long block, including a camshaft, front cover, oil pan, valve covers, but not the accessories. Let me show you how I package this thing out. Up top, Holley's most affordable and basic carburetor. This is an aluminum version of the 1850, which is a 600 CFM vacuum secondary single feed carburetor. Our intake manifold is a basic low-rise dual plane from Speedmaster. That's $152. The ignition system is an HEI, which GM came out with in, I think, 1974. It means high energy ignition. It has a coil and a module and the trigger and everything right there. That's your whole ignition system, $136. The Excel 4000 series wires are about $40. These are Flowtech 1 5/8 inch headers for an early Chevelle, $152. So we're talking pretty cheap, pretty basic, and watch this, because it is going to make power like you've never seen. Really. So we started at 2200. My torque number is way wrong. What a dog! It's a dog, and it made a lot more torque than I thought. Call up the numbers, what was that? You know what, it just sounds lame, doesn't it? Yeah. It's like, So our torque is 334.9 at 3,200 RPM. I guessed it was gonna peak at 2,800 RPM. And our horsepower is 235.7 at 4,100 RPM. We're gonna find out what happens when we add a point of compression, a better cylinder head, and 35 degrees more cam time. 35 degrees? Well, yeah, we're going to that 230 Magnum, and this is a 194 at 50 cam. We're putting 36 degrees intake duration in it. We might be able to make 1 horsepower per cubic inch. I think we're going to make it better than that. More than 1 horsepower per cubic inch? Yeah. You think we're going to pick up 100 horsepower? With a good head and a cam, I mean, shouldn't this thing make 350 horsepower? We'll have to do another bit sheet. Yeah. I don't know. You ready to wrench? Sure. Dude, that was bleak. Can you imagine stabbing a brand new 350 Chevy into your car and then telling your friends that you got less than 240 horsepower? Awkward. I hope we're gonna fix that right now though. Here are the key problems with that engine. First of all, minuscule camshaft, almost non-existent, 194 degrees of duration at 50 thousandths lift, less than 400 thousandths lift on that turd. We're gonna solve that with a Comp Cams 280 Magnum, which is 230 degrees of duration at 50, and it has 480 thousandths lift. It's a flat tappet just like the other one. It's fairly affordable. It's $195 if you want to get the cam and lifter package. So depending on what you need, you can decide which kit you're going to buy there. Next up, we got to look at the cylinder heads. Now these things appear almost identical, but there are big differences. On my left here, I've got the swirl port head that came off of our crate engine. This was used in 91 and earlier Chevy trucks, and basically it's a complete turd. Even though it looks like a Vortec head because it has those center bolt valve covers and stuff, it's not. This is a Vortec head. These were used on 350 Chevys with the L31 designation from 1996 to the year 2000. They were only in trucks and SUVs. And the thing is, you can still pick them up in junkyards. That's the great thing about them. There are some drawbacks though. The biggie is that they won't handle a lot of valve lift without machining because the bottom of the retainer hits the top of the valve guide. You can only put about 450 thousandths lift in them before you run into a problem. They also have press-in rocker studs, just like this swirl port head, and you get a lot of valve spring pressure on them. Those tend to pop out, so you want to modify them to have a screw-in stud, just like this one has been modified. The other thing is you'll often find in the aftermarket heads that they'll put bigger valves in them. Blueprint Engines actually did this set of Vortex for us, and they've got a 2.02 inch intake valve instead of the stock 194. The really big deal here though is that the intake port on the Vortec is so much superior than it is on the swirl port. It's ridiculous. And if you look at the chamber, this is your standard smog era garbage bathtub of a combustion chamber. Whereas here on the Vortec, you've got a much nicer heart-shaped chamber, more of a modern design, and this is 64 cc's instead of 76. That means that we're gonna take our crate engine from 8.25 to 1 with the swirl port head to 9.2 to 1 with the Vortec head, and that is gonna be a really big deal. Next up, you're gonna have to consider your intake manifold if you're changing from a swirl port head or an older one to a Vortec head. Now this is a Speedmaster intake manifold. It is designed to run both the TPI pattern or the classic old school pattern that you'd find in like a 69 Camaro or 74 Monte Carlo. The old school pattern, all of the bolts go in at the same angle. The TPI pattern on this swirl port head is different in the middle, just like it would be on like an 87 TPI Camaro. The Speedmaster intake has adapters to do both, but it won't fit a Vortec head because the Vortec head intake has bolts that go straight up and down, and they also take a different intake gasket for that reason. Now this intake manifold for the classic setup is about $152. This one for the Vortex, almost $170. So you do need to keep that in mind if you're being budget conscious. Speaking of which, if you don't want to scrounge the junkyards for your Vortec heads, I like a place called Scoggin Dickey. It's a Chevy dealership, and they offer a package of brand new heads with all of these upgrades on them. They're $890, but you can do it much cheaper if you scrounge on your own. And when you do, you're gonna make a whole bunch more power, or at least that's the theory, and we're gonna go find out if it's true right now. Out with the world's smallest camshaft. I got this Comp Cam's what they call a K kit, which comes with the cam, lifters, timing chains, and valve seals, and springs and retainers. Everything that you need. Just guide that cam in, and boom, no fancy installation tool required. Okay. Dots are lined up, simple as it gets. No degreeing of the camshaft here. These three bolts here on the end of the cam, sometimes you'll see a locking plate on them, which is a really good idea. In this case, I would brake clean them and get rid of all the oil and use Loctite on them. Really don't want these backing out. All right, we just slapped the cam in, and as usual with a flat tappet, you have to break in the cam with a special oil. AMSOIL makes that break in oil. Once that's been run through the engine, this time, we're using an oil you've never seen on Engine Masters, the OE line from AMSOIL. It's a 1030. This is an affordable synthetic oil. It's about $5 a quart, and that's why they thought it would be the perfect thing for our low-buck little small block Chevy here. But first up, you gotta make sure that this cam doesn't go bad. Ah, so much easier with no valve cover, right? Winning. Okay, we're gonna pause our installation just a second for gasket maker science. Here's why. We have a new sponsor on Engine Masters, and it's Permatex, which is totally cool because we use this stuff all the time, and it's like, you know, a major part of every gearhead lifestyle. I'm gonna give you a tip about what you just saw about us slapping the intake manifold on that small block Chevy. See, at the end of the intake manifold where it seals to the block, there's what we call a China wall, and the intake manifold comes down here and there's a gap. Now normally, a gasket kit comes with a piece of cork that goes in there. But the problem is, with all this aftermarket stuff we deal with, the cork is usually either too thick or too thin. So we throw that away, and instead we use RTV. Our norm is to use the Permatex Ultra Gray, but they've got this new product that we're trying out. It's called the Optimum Gray, and it's actually an improvement on that Ultra Gray product. It can handle more heat, they say up to 700 degrees, and it's more vibration resistant. I have noticed that it doesn't have the same viscosity as the Ultra Gray. It's a little bit like thinner. And you'll see here that we will just go ahead and lay a bead that we will eyeball at about the height of the gap in the intake manifold. And you can't go too extreme here, but what I'm doing is about right. And it's funny because we always have a competition to see who can do this most neatly. And I think I am winning right now. You always gotta make sure to get this stuff tucked under the gasket at the end there, and that thing is not gonna leak. So thanks Permatex, our new sponsor on Engine Masters. Intake manifold, I pre-fit it, so I'm pretty sure this is gonna work. And goop.
Ooh, perfect squish.
Perfection. Here's the difference between a vacuum secondary and a double pumper carburetor. See this vacuum pod right here? It senses airspeed through the venturi up here, which creates a pressure drop, which opens up the secondaries. On this thing, it's all mechanical. And this thing, the 1850 carburetor, only has a primary accelerator pump discharge nozzle, which we also call a squirter, whereas a double pumper pumps twice. It has one in the front and one in the back. Way more better. So now, once again, Brule has been through the tuning process. He knows the answer. I have my numbers written down, but let's wait until we actually pull it to see who's right. You got yours right there?
I never get to play because I always have to tune it first.
I know. Not always, only sometimes.
Yeah.
So to review, different carburetor at the same CFM, slightly different intake manifold, essentially the same, better cylinder head, much more camshaft, one more point of compression.
And both were stock heads too.
Yeah.
You know, production OEM iron
OEM
heads.
Yeah. All right, let's see what we pick up.
All right, you guys ready? That's a lot of improvement.
That's a lot of improvement. That's totally worth it.
That's way over 100 horsepower.
Let's see what it did. Wow. We just made 397 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 RPM and 364.9 horsepower at 5,500. We made 130 horsepower.
Look like heroes, huh?
It's like a 50% gain. Almost 40% gain.
Wow.
But see, if we had something that made 1 horsepower and turned it into 2, it'd be 100% gain. So
yeah,
we had some room to grow.
At 62 pound-feet. Let's see the overlay before
That's like
and after.
a whole different engine now.
Wow. Obviously, these lines way down here are our baseline with the original heads and everything on it. And up here is everything we just did. There is no way to overstate the difference this feels like in the car. It's ridiculous.
It's 125 shot of nitrous.
Yeah.
All the time.
All the time. Okay, are you ready for this?
Are you?
Yes.
The envelope, please.
Yep.
Don't pull out the wrong envelope.
Let's hear yours first.
Academy Award style. 385 torque at 4,200. So I was 10 foot-pounds off and 100 RPM off.
Okay.
That's good.
What about you?
For torque?
Yeah.
402 at 3,900.
Ooh. You were closer than me.
Yep.
At what RPM?
I called 3,900 and it did it at 4,000.
So you're $100
Yeah,
off.
so I was $100 off.
There you go.
And
375 at 5,600.
365 at 5,500.
Why do we need a dyno? Why?
That was dead boom nuts. Nice job there, Freiberger.
Should I tell him?
Oh no, you didn't. You cheated? Oh, you got me again.
That you were close, but you know what though? You didn't know the torque.
No, I didn't know the
And
torque.
that was
I
a
guessed
good
the
shot.
torque.
That was a good shot on the torque within
Yeah.
just a couple of pound feet. So excellent
He
job.
told me the power number. He said
Oh, really?
360,
Oh,
and that,
man.
I went from there.
Ah, dude.
But still,
So you back
amazing.
calculated?
Way good.
And you know what? That's not really an expensive thing to do.
Well, I did all the math on that. I'll tell you exact numbers on how much that all cost when we do our wrap up.
Okay. I'll
Ready?
be all ears. Let's
Go. So here's the cha-ching on the whole deal.
go. Okay, let's hear it.
So I added up every dime it cost to duplicate this. I mean, gaskets, everything, with the exception of the electric water pump, the two-piece front cover, and the water neck. I mean,
Okay.
everything. So step one that made 237 whopping horsepower,
Weakling.
$2,250.
Pretty cheap though for all new.
It is. This though, and the 365 horsepower configuration, $3,550. It's a difference of $1,300.
You know, for the power gain,
Totally worth
I
it.
don't think there's any way you can get it cheaper than that.
The thing is, I know a lot of people are going to look at those numbers and go, I could put a turbo LS in my car for that. And you know what? With scrounging, you probably could. But what do you think you could put this together with? What are you spending?
Find the heads in classifieds or machine shops or even a wrecking yard. You could get all this stuff a lot cheaper than, you know, your retail price. So,
Yeah, I bet you we could make this happen for $1,800, something
Oh, yeah,
like that. And
probably.
that was really my point, to show people if you've got like your 82 Chevy truck driving around, this is the type of package you can look for. And it's the cheapest way I think you're gonna get 350, 360 horsepower.
practically any small block Chevy 350 can take these parts, even an old one.
Like you told me, you can never go wrong with the 350 Chevy.
I like it
Yeah.
now.
Now it
Yeah.
was a turd before.
I didn't like it
But
before.
now it's good.
Yeah.
But wait till you see what we do with this thing next. It's actually going to be really good. I'll just give you a hint. Boost.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
See you next time on Engine Masters, presented by AMSOIL and supported by Mr. Gasket and Earl's Vapor Guard Plumbing.
So what do they call polyblock a polyblock?
Because it has more than one part, it's two parts. Poly means more than one. It's from ancient Greek.